One local independent researcher working to uncover the secrets hidden at the bottom of Lake Tahoe.
Instead of a submarine, he's using a custom-built rover.
A research team really was recording.
Easing a camera along a steamer, the water had hidden for more than 80 years.
The survey was routine, almost dull, until the lights drifted a few feet past the wreck and caught something resting on the lake bed that did not belong there.
Within seconds, a single voice in that freezing control room ordered the feed killed. No one has ever released what came after. And the reason the rumor refuses to die is simple: something on the floor of Lake Tahoe.
Yet, because Lake Tahoe is so big, the level moves up and down a lot more slowly than lakes like Folsom and Shasta. But now, Tahoe is already at its lowest level in 4 years, and it's still headed down. Tahoe is one of the rare places on Earth where whatever sinks into it never decays. It only waits. The lake that keeps. To understand why a room full of seasoned operators would cut a live feed and refuse to look at it again, the place to start is the floor of Lake Tahoe itself. Because this is not a normal lake. Tahoe sits more than 6,200 feet above sea level on the line between California and Nevada. From shore, it reads like a postcard. Water so clear it barely looks like water, snow on the peaks doubled across a glass flat surface. That clarity is honest, but it describes only the top few feet of something enormous. The clarity is also genuinely strange. On a calm day, a pale object can be tracked dozens of feet straight down before the water finally folds over it and takes it from view. That's right. Wildfires are not the only natural disaster on the radar of regional experts. There's something else they're worried about, and it lies deep beneath Lake Tahoe, and the lake holds so much water and runs so deep that it has never once been recorded freezing over, even in the hardest winters when the shallow edges crust with ice. Beneath the swimmable summer surface, the deep water sits near 40 all year, a cold the seasons never reach. At its deepest, the lake drops more than 1,600 feet, which makes it the second deepest in the United States. The deepest point alone could swallow a 60-story building and leave room above the roof. And there is enough water in the basin to bury the entire state of California more than a foot deep. The farther down a camera travels, the less the place behaves like a lake at all. The light gives out long before the bottom, so the floor of Tahoe has never once seen the sun. Below a certain depth, the temperature falls off a cliff, and the silence turns into something divers describe as a physical weight. People who work deep water for a living talk about Tahoe with a particular weariness, not because it is the most dangerous water they know, but because of how completely it cuts a person off from light, sound, and any sense of up or down. It is about as close to leaving the planet as anyone can get without leaving the ground. The casinos and ski lifts are still in view from the deck of the boat. A few hundred feet below, there is a world that might as well be on the far side of the moon. What unsettles the people who go down there, when the water at the bottom of the lake circles to the surface, is not danger so much as the absence of everything familiar. There is no horizon to steady the eye, no surface light filtering down, no sound carried through the water. Direction stops meaning anything except as a number on a gauge. The dark is not the dark of a closed room which the mind can map and fill in. It is a dark with no edges, and it presses in from every side at once. Here is the part that matters. Tahoe is what scientists call a terminal lake. Water flows in from snow melt and streams, but almost nothing flows back out. There is no great river draining it downhill and carrying its contents away. What this lake takes, it tends to keep. Near the floor. The conditions turn that tendency into something close to a law. The water hovers just above freezing every month of the year, summer included. Almost no light reaches it ever, and there is barely any oxygen that deep. That combination, cold and dark and starved of oxygen, is the whole secret. The bacteria and the slow processes that normally break a sunken object down can barely function in it. Wood lasts, metal lasts. Far softer things last longer than they have any right to. A warm, shallow lake recycles whatever sinks into it within a season or two. Tahoe does the opposite. It does not erase. It archives. It holds whatever goes under almost exactly as it was the moment it slipped beneath the surface, and then it waits. That single quality is what turned the floor of the lake into an obsession for a certain kind of person. If Tahoe truly preserves whatever it swallows, then somewhere in that freezing dark, a famous ship might still be standing nearly whole, decades after the rest of the world had written her off for good. And there was one ship in particular nobody could stop thinking about. Queen of the Lake. Long before highways wrapped the shoreline, one ship ruled this water, and her name was the Tahoe. She was the largest steamer the lake had ever carried. About 169 feet of steel and teak and brass built narrow and fast for her time. Her hull was assembled in sections at an ironworks in San Francisco, then loaded onto rail cars, hauled over the grade, and put back together on the shore of the lake before she was launched in the 1890s. She could carry around 200 passengers and pushed close to 18 knots, fast enough that the crossing felt less like a ferry ride and more like an event. For roughly 4 decades, she was simply how a person crossed Tahoe. She ran the mail, the freight, and the passengers. Her dining room finished in mahogany and marble, with electric lights, hot and cold running water, and steam heat in the cabins, when all of that was still a marvel. People called her the Queen of the Lake, and the name fit. They dressed up to ride her. Families planned their days around her schedule, timing arrivals and goodbyes to when she rounded the point. She was the proudest moving piece of the entire basin. The kind of vessel people built memories around and talked about for the rest of their lives. For a while, the whole rhythm of the lake bent around her. Towns set their clocks by her arrivals. Hotels timed their guests to her schedule. To live on Tahoe in those years was to grow up with the sight of her crossing the water, and more than one childhood memory of the place had the queen of the lake somewhere in the frame. Then the lake changed underneath her. Through the 1930s, a road was finished all the way around the shore. Cars took the passengers, trucks took the freight, and she lost the mail contract that had been her last real purpose. The thing that had made her essential did not vanish all at once. It drained away one new stretch of pavement at a time until a ship that had carried a region was a ship with nowhere left to go. She sat at her dock for years, unused and defaced by vandals, a grand relic nobody could afford to run. Her owner could not stand the thought of her being cut up for scrap. So in 1940 he decided to sink her himself off Glenbrook, the place she had first been launched. The plan was almost a tribute. She would rest at around 100 feet, shallow enough that glass-bottom boats could glide over her, so visitors could look down through clear water at the queen of the lake lying in state. She would become a kind of underwater museum, a monument to a vanished age that would never quite be gone. The decision was not popular. Local children reportedly tried to save her, signing petitions and pleading with anyone who would listen. And a crowd gathered on the day to watch the grand old steamer be put down on purpose. The way people gather for something they already know they will regret. The lake had other plans. On the night of the scuttling, the boat doing the towing was far too small for the job, working in the dark with no way to sound the depth beneath it. The slope of the lake bed in that spot was far steeper than anyone realized. When the Tahoe finally went under, she did not settle onto a shallow shelf where the town could admire her. She struck bottom around 330 feet, and then she slid down the steep underwater slope. She went deeper and deeper into the cold until she came to rest with her bow near 360 feet and her stern closer to 500, far below the reach of any glass-bottom boat, far below the reach of any ordinary diver. The next morning, pieces of her washed up along the shore. Scraps of the grand old ship drifting back as if the lake had returned a few souvenirs before keeping the rest. That was meant to be the end of it. It was the beginning of a legend. For decades, no one could say exactly where she had come to rest. The deep water had taken her, and deep water does not hand out coordinates. Some swore she had broken apart on the way down and lay scattered across the basin. Others insisted she stood upright and whole in the dark, exactly the way Tahoe was rumored to keep things. Every failed search stretched the story a little further, until truth and myth were tangled too tightly to pull apart. The long search. Finding a ship on the floor of Lake Tahoe is nothing like finding one at sea. Below a certain depth, ordinary diving is off the table here, and the altitude makes everything worse. The thin air at 6,000 feet throws off the careful math divers depend on to surface alive, turning a deep dive in this lake into one of the most punishing technical challenges anywhere in the country. Even the teams that eventually managed it paid for it. The nearest decompression chamber sits about an hour away down the mountain in Reno, and divers who pushed too hard on the wreck came up with the bends and had to be treated. There is almost no margin for error at that altitude in that depth, which is part of why the ship sat unseen for so long while the world drove circles around the lake above her. Reaching the queen of the lake required sonar, remotely operated vehicles trailing long tethers into the black real money, and the patience to sweep a basin the size of a small sea, one narrow strip at a time. People tried anyway for decades because the harder the lake held her, the more someone wanted to be the one to drag her back into the light. Some of the early attempts bordered on the absurd. In the early 1960s, a gaming pioneer who ran one of the lakeside casinos, a man with money and a fascination for what lay beneath the water, reportedly went hunting for the wreck using a casino surveillance camera sealed inside a homemade waterproof housing. The same kind of camera that watched his card tables lowered into hundreds of feet of freezing water to catch a glimpse of a ghost. By some accounts, the strange rig actually worked, and he became one of the first to lay eyes on her. Decades before anyone had the equipment to do it properly. After the curious came the greedy. Through the 60s and 70s, looters who knew roughly where she lay dropped grappling hooks and pulley systems into the dark and tore pieces off her to sell. They gouged chunks out of her teak railings and scarred the old ship for trophies. The marks are still there, like claw scratches on something that could not defend itself. Documenting her properly took far longer and demanded far more. A serious search is not the treasure hunt the movies sell. It is engineering and endurance. A boat held steady against a wind that wants to push it off its line. Sonar lowered over the side, an hour spent reading shadows on a screen. A promising shape rises out of the dark and turns out to be a boulder, a fold of sediment, or a tangle of junk with no story attached. And every so often, the lake offers up something nobody went looking for. The queen of the lake is not the only thing down there. The basin has taken other steamers and launches and barges over the years more than anyone has fully cataloged. One sister steamer was towed to the middle of the lake, soaked in gasoline and burned down to the waterline. Another vanished after being scuttled and has never been found. A storm took one outright. A smaller boat was eventually raised from the cold after sitting on the bottom for decades. Crews hunting one wreck have crossed the silent shapes of others they could not immediately name. For years, the expeditions came and the expeditions failed. Tahoe does not give up its secrets to anyone in a hurry. And the deepest parts of the basin are not somewhere a person can simply swim down and look around. Sweep after sweep turned up boulders and sediment and the wrong kind of shadow. Each failure made the next attempt more expensive and the legend a little taller until the queen of the lake had stopped being a sunken steamer and become a prize. The thing a person found only if they were good enough and stubborn enough to beat a lake that had beaten everyone before them. That raises a question that does not leave once it arrives. This is a famous lake, a studied lake ringed by towns and roads and millions of visitors a year. If an entire vessel can lie on the bottom for decades before anyone logs it, the obvious question is what else is down there that no one has found? And who else might already know? That is the strange thing about deep water this close to civilization. The surface is mapped, photographed, and crowded. The bottom may as well be another planet sitting a few hundred feet beneath the jet skis. The same patch of water that hosts a summer regatta on Saturday afternoon holds directly below it a cold, dark archive that almost no one has ever seen. And once that gap is understood, every shape that climbs onto a sonar screen carries a second question underneath the first. Not just what is it, but how long has it been here? And what was it before it came to rest in the dark? A search that began as a hunt for one lost steamer turns almost without anyone deciding it should into a slow accounting of everything the lake has quietly filed away into the dark. The team that finally goes down to her picks its window carefully. Late winter gives Tahoe its clearest water when the cold settles the sediment and the visibility opens up. It is the one stretch of the year that offers a clean look at the bottom. Clarity is not comfort. The wind comes straight off the snow and cuts through every layer. Equipment ices over, lines stiffen, hands go numb on the controls, and feet stop reporting back hours before anyone is willing to admit it is time to quit. None of it stops a crew that chases wrecks for a living because the window is short, and the ship has eluded everyone before them. The boat holds position against the wind. The sonar goes over the side, the monitors flicker to life one by one, and the slow grinding work of looking begins. It is not the dash to a glittering target that the movies promise. The sonar sweeps the floor in long methodical strips and the operators read the returns hour after hour, the same gray field scrolling past, while the cold settles into their hands and the daylight burns down. A search like this is mostly patience. Contact by contact, shape by shape, in water that has not felt the sun since long before anyone aboard was born. Most of the day yields nothing worth keeping. Then the lake answers. A strong, clean signal climbs onto the screen, and this time the dimensions line up. The length lines up, everything lines up. After all the boulders and false starts, the numbers on the monitor suddenly describe something the right size and the right shape to be the ship itself. The mood in the cramped, freezing control space tightens into something electric, and the talking stops. The vehicle drops toward the contact, its lights carving a narrow cone through water so black it seems to drink them. The tether feeds out foot after foot, lowering the camera into a place the human body is not allowed to go. For a long stretch, the screen shows nothing but drifting particles, white flecks falling endlessly through the dark like underwater snow caught in the lamp. There is no sense of speed down there. No reference for anything, only the depth numbers climbing and a slow awareness of how much cold water now stands overhead past any point a diver could follow. The room goes quiet on its own because some part of the mind understands exactly where that camera is heading. Then the floor rises into the lights and something massive begins to take shape at the bottom of the frame. It comes up the way large things always come up in deep water. Not all at once, but in pieces. First an edge, then a long deliberate curve. Then the bow, a railing, and unbroken sections of hull resolving out of the black. Far too large and too purposeful to be anything the lake made on its own. The shape runs on past the edges of the frame, and the certainty in the room grows with every foot of it. They have found her. After more than half a century underwater, parts of her look almost untouched. Windows are still in place. Deck structures still stand. Railings hold their lines. The damage from the looters is there if a person knows where to look. But the ship beneath it is unmistakably whole. She sits upright on the floor as though she were set down the day before yesterday. A whole ship intact and silent in water that has not held a scrap of light in 50 years. There is a long stretch where the only sound in the control room is the hum of the gear. Because a thing everyone half believed was a myth is now sitting on the monitor in front of them, lit by a single roving lamp. Everything the lake's reputation promised, the cold, the stillness, the refusal to let go, has kept her nearly whole. And that is exactly what the camera came down to record. The survey settles into a careful rhythm. The vehicle eases along the length of the hull while the operators call out features as they pass. For a few minutes, it is everything a discovery is supposed to be, methodical and controlled and almost routine. A crew finally getting to look a ghost in the face. Something else. Here is where the documented record and the story that has trailed this lake for years split apart. From this point on, almost everything comes from a single account. One that has circulated for decades, passed from person to person, and retold until it took on the worn smoothness of something repeated many times. There is no signed statement. There is no second tape in any public archive. There is only the story. And a man who says he was in that room, who has never put his name to it in any way anyone can check. That is worth stating plainly because it is the entire reason this remains a legend and not a finding. Take it or leave it. But here is how he tells it. The survey was going perfectly. He says when the camera drifted just past the visible side of the wreck and someone noticed something on the floor nearby that should not have been there. At first, they took it for debris, a pale shape near the sediment. Another piece of the lake bed caught in the lights. The mind reaches for the easy answer first. And the easy answer was debris, nothing, move on. The closer the camera crept, the less sense the object made. The shape was too smooth, too symmetrical, too deliberate. It did not have the random broken look of wreckage or stone. A coat hung on a door can read as a person standing in the dark until a second look corrects it. According to him, the second look never corrected anything. The longer the lights held on it, the more the shape kept its meaning instead of dissolving into something ordinary. Then a second, darker shape appeared behind the first. Then another beside it, 3 of them now, where a moment earlier there had been an empty patch of floor, and they were not scattered the loose, careless way a debris field scatters. They sat in relation to one another in a way the eye reads instantly as wrong, as placed, as arranged, as meaning something. A wreck this old has an explanation for everything on it. The hull is the hull, the railing is the railing. Sediment is sediment. And the scattered metal is just the wreckage settling, the way wreckage settles. These shapes were the one thing on the screen that refused to take its place among the rest. And on a floor where everything else made sense, that refusal was the worst part. For a moment, the instinct of the professionals took over. And that instinct is probably the only reason the camera stayed pointed as long as it did. Get a better angle. Steady the vehicle. Bring the light around. Document it. Whatever it is, the explanations came out loud, one after another, the way they do when a room is hoping to be talked out of something. A piece of the wreck that fell and settled wrong. Sediment built up over an old fixture into a shape that only looked deliberate. A trick of the lamp and the drifting particles and tired eyes. Each explanation held for about as long as it took to say. Then the camera lingered a second longer. The explanation came apart, and the room dropped back into silence. There is a particular kind of dread in wanting badly to be wrong about what is on a screen and slowly running out of ways to be. The crazy part is what happened when the easy answers ran out. By his account, one man asked for the vehicle to hold, not to turn and not to push forward, just to stop and keep the camera steady on whatever filled the lower half of the frame. The room had gone quiet in a different way by then. Not the focused quiet of the search, but something heavier. The quiet of people who have each privately arrived at the same thought and are waiting for someone else to say it first. Then one man finally leaned close to the monitor, studied the image for a long moment, and said quietly that he thought they were looking at remains. That was the moment it broke open. Voices climbed over each other in that tiny space. Some pushing to move in closer and get it on the record, others already done and wanting out. One voice ordered the vehicle pulled back immediately. Another insisted they keep recording, that they needed it, that no one could just turn away and leave it. Then the feed cut. Whether a hand hit a switch or grabbed the wrong line in the chaos, or whether the order and the cut simply happened in the same few frantic seconds, he could never say for certain. The result was the same. One moment there were shapes on the screen and voices arguing over the top of one another. The next, there was gray static and a room full of people who had all stopped breathing at once. What the lake keeps by his account. The footage was almost beside the point. What stayed with him was what happened after the screen went gray. These were not tourists with a camera. They were people who worked deep water for a living, who knew exactly what 50-year-old wreckage looks like, who had seen things in the dark that turned most stomachs and gone back down the next morning. Anyway, after this, that same crew wanted nothing more to do with whatever had been on the screen. They did not want to review the recording. They did not want to talk it through and decide what it really was. They wanted off the water, and they wanted to leave the wreck and whatever lay beside it exactly where the lake had been keeping it. All of that can be dismissed as a campfire story and technical clothing, and maybe it should be. But the part that cannot be dismissed is the reason it has refused to die. The lake is real. The ship is real. And she still stands upright in the cold right now. And what Tahoe does to whatever sinks into it is not a legend. It is physics. In near-freezing, oxygen-starved, lightless water, a body does not collapse into a clean skeleton the way it would in a warm, shallow lake. The cold shuts the normal process of decay down. Things stay intact for decades, sometimes far longer, holding their shape long after they should be gone. This is not theory at Tahoe. A smaller vessel was raised from the lake around the turn of the millennium after more than half a century on the bottom. And it came up packed with silt and crawfish, but otherwise held in a state of near-arrested decay. Its timbers intact, preserved by the same cold and dark that holds the queen of the lake upright today. The wood that should have rotted to nothing was still wood. What the lake had taken, it had simply kept. So if anything down there had once been part of a person, the lake would not offer a clean, distant pile of bones. It would offer something that still looked in the merciless logic of that water, like what it had been the day it went under. That is the difference between a story that merely unsettles and one that sits in the chest and stays there. Lay that over the other thing people around Tahoe have traded for generations. The old casino-era stories from the 1950s and 60s about people made to disappear, dropped into deep water where no one would think or dare to look. Most of it is surely folklore. Tales to rattle the tourists and fill the quiet hours in lakeside bars. For most lakes, those stories collapse on contact with biology. A body dropped into warm, shallow water does not stay a body for long, and within a few seasons, there is nothing left to find. The whole genre of the disappearance depends on the evidence erasing itself. But folklore lands differently once it sits next to a fact. Tahoe is one of the only places on Earth where the things someone wanted gone would not break down at all. The same cold and dark and stillness that kept a steamer standing for 50 years would keep anything else standing too. They would simply wait, preserved in the dark, for a camera lowered after something else entirely to drift across them. That is why the story still circulates after all these years. Not because anyone proved what drifted into the final frame, because no one ever can. Uncertainty at the bottom of a freezing 1,600 feet lake does not sit in the mind the way ordinary uncertainty does. A doubt about almost anything else eventually wears thin and falls away. A doubt anchored to a place that genuinely preserves what it hides only grows heavier with time because nothing about the lake ever steps in to settle it. Tahoe is the one place where the very worst version of the story is also a physically possible one. It cannot quite be debunked. And a half-truth that cannot be killed is the most powerful kind of legend there is. So here is the question that has trailed this lake for decades. If you had been in that control room watching those pale shapes rise out of the dark beneath the queen of the lake, would you have kept the camera rolling and forced the room to look hard at what was really down there? Or would you have done exactly what they say the crew did? Pulled it back, killed the feed, and left whatever it was lying precisely where the lake had been keeping it all along? Some people are certain the deepest parts of Tahoe hold nothing but old ships and forgotten junk and a few good ghost stories. Others are just as certain the lake is still hiding things and always will be. Drop your honest answer in the comments.